The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension as the bailiff opened the doors for the morning session. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a pale sheen over the wood-paneled room. Lawyers rustled papers. A few early defendants shuffled to their seats. The atmosphere was routine, until he walked in. Jordan Cole stepped inside, wearing a sharp, dark navy suit and polished shoes that clicked softly against the tile. He carried nothing but a slim leather folder under his arm. Calm, composed. Yet eyes followed him instantly. Not out of recognition, but confusion and judgment. He was young, black. Too young and too black, it seemed, for many in the room to reconcile with the setting. One officer standing near the defense bench smirked audibly. Sergeant Mills, a stocky white cop with 30 years on the force, nudged his colleague and motioned toward Jordan with his chin. "Look at this guy," he muttered. "Lost, or thinking he's in the wrong courtroom?" A quiet laugh followed. Jordan heard it, didn't flinch. He walked steadily toward the front row, pausing near the prosecution table. He glanced up at the judge's bench, then over to the clerk's station. Everyone was still. The smirking officer leaned in. "You waiting for someone, partner?" "Because this seat's for attorneys." Jordan finally looked over. His voice was even, unshaken. "I know," the officer chuckled. "You sure you're in the right place? This isn't traffic court." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "I'm exactly where I need to be." The courtroom doors opened again. This time, it was the presiding judge, flanked by the senior court clerk. They walked briskly toward the bench, but before sitting, the judge turned toward the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "before we begin today's docket, I'd like to introduce our new district attorney, Mr. Jordan Cole." The silence that followed was heavy. The laughter died mid-breath. The smirk on Sergeant Mills's face collapsed into stunned disbelief. Jordan stepped forward, slowly but with unmistakable authority, and extended a hand to the judge. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said smoothly. "Looking forward to serving this court." And just like that, the room shifted. The black man they laughed at? He now held more power than anyone else in the room. The courtroom was still adjusting to the weight of the announcement when Judge Berkeley nodded for the session to begin. Jordan took his seat at the prosecutor's table, calm, collected, every motion deliberate. Behind him, legal aides from the DA's office exchanged whispers, clearly uncertain how to respond. Some looked relieved. Others, uncomfortable. Change always left shadows. The first case was called. A teenage boy shuffled to the stand, no older than 17. Black. Slouched. Wrists in cuffs that looked too heavy for someone his size. The charges? Misdemeanor theft, a pack of energy drinks, and a phone charger. His public defender offered a quick nod, clearly used to hurrying through the process. Before the judge could speak, Jordan raised his hand. "Your Honor," he said, "the district attorney's office would like to move for immediate dismissal." The courtroom paused. Even Judge Berkeley looked surprised. "On what grounds, Mr. Cole?" he asked. Jordan stood, straightening his cuffs. "After reviewing the arrest footage and police report, there's insufficient basis for prosecution. The boy was detained without probable cause, and the items were recovered on site. There was no theft." The judge raised an eyebrow. "You're certain?" "Yes, Your Honor." And furthermore, Jordan's gaze shifted toward the prosecution team behind him. "We'll be reviewing several recent misdemeanor arrests from this precinct, specifically those disproportionately involving youth of color." A murmur rippled through the room. Sergeant Mills, still seated in the back row, leaned forward, arms crossed, clearly seething. He didn't speak, but his expression said enough. The judge nodded. Case dismissed. Defendant released. The teen blinked in disbelief. His mother, sitting behind the defense table, let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Jordan sat down again, expression neutral. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't made a speech. He had just let facts and the power of his position do the work. It wasn't about making noise, not yet. It was about setting the tone. He wasn't just here to wear a title. He was here to change the rules they'd been playing by for decades. The courthouse cafeteria was mostly empty by mid-afternoon. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as staff, filtered out to return to their desks. But Jordan Cole remained at the long window table in the back, a single tablet in front of him, files open. He wasn't eating. He was reviewing. His fingers slid across arrest records. Lines of names, most of them black or Latino, the charges minor, the convictions piling high. The further he dug, the clearer the pattern became. This wasn't enforcement. This was targeting. A knock on the glass snapped him out of focus. Megan Reese, the senior assistant DA, stood at the door. Early 40s, sharp suit, sharp mind. She'd been passed over for the DA role when Jordan was appointed, and she hadn't forgotten. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, stepping in. "Yes," Jordan said, gesturing to the seat across from him. "Close the door." She hesitated, then obeyed. He turned the tablet toward her. "You've been here a long time. You know this office, this city. So I'll ask you plainly. Why do 83% of our misdemeanor charges come from Precinct 9? Megan crossed her arms. "That's where most of the petty crimes happen. Look at the stats." "I am looking at the stats," he replied, voice even. "And I'm seeing neighborhoods over-policed and underrepresented. I'm seeing high-volume arrests for nonviolent offenses, all processed by this office like an assembly line." Her jaw tightened. "Jordan, Mr. Cole," he corrected gently. "In this room, we keep it professional." She blinked. A long silence stretched between them. "I'm not here to make enemies," he continued, "but I am here to clean house. Starting with our policies, we're suspending automatic prosecution for nonviolent misdemeanors, effective immediately. Every charge will now require a documented review and community impact justification. That's going to jam the whole system. Then the system needs jamming," he said flatly. "Because if it's moving fast enough to steamroll teenagers for loitering or resisting arrest without context, then it's not justice. It's machinery." Megan sat back. Her expression was unreadable, part resistance, part quiet admiration. Maybe she hadn't expected him to move this fast. Maybe she thought he was just a face for headlines. But now, she was seeing what everyone would eventually have to accept. Jordan Cole wasn't here to fit in. He was here to fix what they had broken. The air inside Precinct 9 was thick with the smell of old coffee and older habits. Cops lingered near desks, half interested in paperwork, half watching Jordan Cole as he walked down the main hallway, flanked by 2 aides and a folder tucked under his arm. His tailored suit and quiet confidence stood out like a spotlight in a place used to badges and bulletproof vests. He had called this meeting himself. Not in a courtroom, not in his office. On their turf. At the end of the hallway, a small conference room buzzed with muted conversation. Sergeant Mills stood at the head of the table, arms folded, still clinging to the same dismissive smirk he'd worn in court. A few other officers filled the seats, lieutenants, detectives, patrol leaders. All white, all skeptical. Jordan stepped inside and didn't wait to be invited to speak. "Gentlemen," he said, placing a thick manila folder on the table with a soft thud. "I've reviewed every misdemeanor arrest in this precinct for the last 3 years. Every report, every body cam pull, every drop charge, and every conviction." The room went still. "What I found," he continued, "was a pattern. One that ends today." Mills rolled his eyes. "If you're here to lecture us about racism, you've got the wrong audience." "I'm not here to lecture," Jordan replied coolly. "I'm here to restructure." He opened the folder and began pulling out sheets, arrest stats, internal memos, audio transcripts. One by one, he laid them out like cards on a table. "You've been arresting black kids for standing in front of their own apartment buildings, charging them with obstruction when they ask why they're being stopped, issuing court summonses for sidewalk chalk, for selling water bottles, for walking too slow," a lieutenant muttered under his breath. Jordan didn't miss it. "Uncomfortable? Good," he said, "because that discomfort is the first symptom of accountability. From now on, every misdemeanor arrest from this precinct comes across my desk. Personally. No automatic filings. No cop word is final. You want to press a charge? You show me the footage. You show me the context. You prove it's not about color. It's about cause. Mills stood now. We don't answer to you, District Attorney. You do, and it involves my office. And that includes prosecutorial review, Jordan replied calmly. Unless you'd prefer a press conference. Mills's mouth tightened, but he said nothing. Jordan stepped closer, his voice lowering, not in volume, but in tone. Let me be clear, Sergeant. You laughed at me in court. You saw a black man in a suit and assumed I was lost. But I know exactly where I am. I've walked the streets you patrol. I've lived what your reports reduce to non-compliant. I'm not asking for permission. I'm giving you a choice. Silence. Then Jordan turned to leave, his folder lighter, but his presence heavier than ever. By the time the door shut behind him, the room had changed. No one spoke. No one smirked. The new district attorney had just made his first real visit to Precinct 9, and the rules had shifted. The headlines hit by morning. New DA, shakes up precinct. 9 procedures. Coal orders, body cam reviews for all misdemeanor arrests. Not business as usual, says city's first black district attorney. Some praised him. Others called it performative. But the loudest voices were on talk radio and social media, where the storm brewed fast and ugly. Words like anti-police, activist in a suit, and diversity hire floated through the digital ether. Old guard attorneys scoffed. Political donors grew uneasy. And inside the DA's office, more than one senior staffer was already updating their resumes. But Jordan Cole? He kept moving. That Monday, he stood in front of a room packed with journalists and reporters at City Hall. No teleprompter, no flash. Just him, a microphone, and the city watching. I was appointed to serve justice, not to preserve comfort, he began. I won't apologize for holding every officer and every office in this system to the same standard. And if the truth makes some uncomfortable, then maybe that discomfort is the beginning of change. His words were measured, controlled, but behind them was a fire that burned clean. Afterward, as reporters shouted questions, Jordan stepped off the podium and made his way to the street. Outside, a small protest had gathered, half carrying signs in support, half condemning him. Cops lined the sidewalk. Tension lingered like smoke. That's when he saw her. An elderly black woman, cane in one hand, sign in the other. It read simply, "My grandson was arrested for waiting at a bus stop. Thank you." Their eyes met. She nodded. He nodded back. And in that moment, the noise faded. Because behind the politics, behind the power struggles, behind the pundits and press, was the reason he took the job in the first place. To make it safer for someone like that boy to just stand and exist. The email came in just after midnight. Subject line, "You need to see this." It was from Isaiah, Jordan's most trusted policy analyst, young, sharp, and fiercely loyal. Attached were screenshots from a breaking news story that hadn't gone wide yet but was gaining traction fast in legal circles. A confidential memo, one Jordan had circulated internally only days earlier, was now public. Worse, it had been edited, twisted, weaponized. In its original form, the memo outlined new oversight protocols for low-level charges, including a line about evaluating systemic racial patterns in prosecutorial decision-making. But now, the edited version, anonymously leaked, rephrased that into prioritizing minority offenders for leniency, regardless of evidence. It was a lie, but the damage was done. By morning, the city was buzzing with questions. On talk radio, conservative pundits accused him of legal favoritism. Online trolls called for his resignation. Anonymous threats began arriving through the DA's office inbox. And worst of all, 2 city council members, who once backed him, now called for a formal inquiry. Jordan didn't sleep that night. By 8 a.m., he was standing at the top floor of the courthouse, staring out at a city skyline that suddenly felt colder than usual. Megan Reese walked in without knocking. "They're saying it was an intern," she said. "Someone you hired." "I know it wasn't," Jordan replied without looking at her. "This was done from the inside." Someone who wants me gone. She didn't respond right away. Then softly, "You've made enemies fast." Jordan turned to face her. "I wasn't hired to make friends." He picked up the printed version of the leaked memo. "I was hired to challenge a system built to punish the poor and protect the powerful. Of course they're coming for me." She studied him for a long moment. "Do you want to find out who it was?" He nodded once. "Yes, but not for revenge." "Then what?" He looked down at the stack of real, unedited memos on his desk. "The truth. So, I know exactly where to aim next." The press room was packed. Cameras buzzed. Reporters sat elbow to elbow, their notepads ready. The leaked memo had become the week's hottest controversy. And now, everyone wanted to see how the new DA would respond. Jordan Cole stood behind the podium, a single sheet of paper in front of him. No legal team beside him, no spokesperson. Just him, alone under the lights. He didn't flinch. "3 days ago," he began, "a memo from my office was leaked to the media. Not in full, not in context, but selectively edited to suggest that justice in this city should bend based on race." He paused, letting the weight of the accusation settle. "Let me be clear. That is a lie. What was proposed, and what remains our policy, is that every case must be weighed with facts, context, and an understanding of how systemic bias shapes outcomes in this system." He held up the real memo, unedited. "This is the truth, and we will not run from it. We will not be shamed for doing what is right just because it is also uncomfortable." A few reporters shifted in their seats, surprised by his bluntness. Jordan looked directly at the cameras. "There are those who want me to fail, who laughed when I walked into the courtroom my first day, who still believe that someone who looks like me can't lead without bias. But I didn't take this job for them." He scanned the room. His voice dropped, steady, strong. "I took this job for the boy arrested for selling water bottles, for the father serving time for a crime he didn't commit, for the mother who shows up to court alone because her public defender met her for the first time 5 minutes before trial." He stepped back from the podium. "So, if you're coming for me, come correct. Because I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to change what you never wanted touched." Silence. And then, to everyone's surprise, applause. Slow at first, then growing. Reporters, staffers, even a few courtroom clerks who had come to watch. The moment broke through the noise. That night, local and national networks aired his speech. Clips went viral. Support flooded in from civil rights groups, legal scholars, and everyday citizens, tired of the same broken cycle. Even his harshest critics had to admit one thing: Jordan Cole wasn't backing down. And neither was the movement he had sparked.